You get up in the middle of the night for a glass of water, and even though you've walked this hallway 1,000 times, some part of you still refuses to fully relax until the kitchen light is on. You tell yourself it's silly. There's nothing there. You've lived in this house for years, but your heart rate ticked up anyway, just slightly, the second the hallway went dark. That reaction isn't irrational anxiety left over from childhood. It's far stranger than that. It's an alarm system built with extraordinary care over hundreds of thousands of years, responding to a threat that used to be devastatingly real. Here's the part almost nobody thinks about. You are, physically, a terrible creature to be out after dark. Human eyes are built for daylight. Your retina relies heavily on cone cells, the photoreceptors responsible for sharp detail and color vision. And cones need real light to function at all. Once the sun goes down, your vision shifts almost entirely onto a much cruder backup system, the rod cells, which trade away color and fine detail for basic light sensitivity. That's why a dark room looks flat, grayish, and blurry at the edges. Why you can sense movement in your peripheral vision at night but can't quite identify what moved. Depth perception suffers too. Distances become harder to judge. Edges blur into each other, and the brain, starved of reliable visual data, starts filling in gaps with guesses instead of facts. You are, in the dark, functionally half-blind, stripped of color, stripped of detail, relying on the visual equivalent of a smudged black and white photograph. Now think about who else was awake at the same time. For most of the time, humans and their ancestors have existed. The nighttime world belonged to animals built for exactly the conditions that leave you helpless. Leopards, hyenas, and other large carnivores evolved eyes with a reflective layer behind the retina called the tapetum lucidum, essentially a built-in mirror that bounces light back through the eye a second time, dramatically boosting night vision. The same darkness that turns you into a nearly blind, slow-moving target turns them into precise, efficient hunters. That mismatch wasn't a hypothetical risk early humans worried about. It left a mark. Literally. At a site called Swartkrans in South Africa, paleoanthropologist C.K. Brain examined the skull of an early hominin, an ancestor species living roughly 1.5 million years ago, and found 2 puncture wounds in the bone, spaced exactly the width of a leopard's lower canine teeth. Not close. Exact. The pattern matched known leopard kills of other primates so precisely that Brain concluded the skull hadn't just been found near a leopard den. It had been carried there, dragged in by the neck, the way leopards routinely transport prey into trees and caves to eat undisturbed. Leopards hunt primarily around dusk and through the night. Whoever that hominin was, their final moments almost certainly happened in the dark. Ambushed by something they never fully saw coming. That wasn't an isolated incident either. Anthropologists Donna, Hart, and Sussman spent years compiling evidence like this across the fossil record, cataloging tooth marks, claw marks, and puncture wounds on early hominin remains from multiple species and multiple sites. Their conclusion, laid out in their book, Man the Hunted, pushed back hard against a much older, more flattering story anthropology had told about itself. The image of early humans as fearless hunters at the top of the food chain. The fossil evidence told a less comfortable story. For enormous stretches of human evolutionary history, humans weren't reliably the predator. They were, with real frequency, the prey, hunted by leopards, hyenas, and other large carnivores, especially well-equipped to operate after dark, exactly when human vision was at its weakest. Hart and Sussman went further, arguing that this constant predation pressure may have been a major force behind why humans became such intensely social, group-living, communicative creatures in the first place. Safety wasn't found in individual strength. It was found in numbers, in shared vigilance, in never being the only person awake and watching. Does that reframe the hallway light even slightly? Under that kind of sustained pressure, staying alive wasn't really a matter of raw strength. It was a matter of managing risk in the specific hours when your body was least equipped to detect danger. Sleeping in groups, staying near others who might notice a predator first, avoiding unnecessary movement after dark. Every one of those behaviors would have meant the difference between passing on your genes and becoming, quite literally, someone else's meal. And every one of those behaviors required, first, an internal signal strong enough to override curiosity, boredom, or convenience. A persistent, uncomfortable wariness specifically tied to darkness itself. That's the part that should sound familiar. That's the exact sensation you feel walking down your own dark hallway for a glass of water. Eventually, humans found something that changed the equation entirely: fire. Archaeological evidence, including burned bone and ash deposits at sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, suggests controlled use of fire stretches back roughly 1 million years, overlapping directly with the era of heaviest predation pressure. Fire did more than provide warmth or cook food. It pushed back the one advantage nocturnal predators had always held: superior vision in low light. Most large carnivores, cats especially, share a deep instinctive wariness of flame, an aversion strong enough that a modest campfire could hold back animals easily capable of killing an unprotected human. A fire meant a lit perimeter, a boundary most large predators were reluctant to cross. And for the first time in a very long evolutionary story, humans could sleep without needing every single member of the group to stay half alert all night. Here's the twist that makes all of this stranger, though. Fire, and eventually shelter, weapons, and settled communities largely solved the actual problem. Most people alive today will never encounter a nocturnal predator in their entire lives, and yet the alarm never got switched off. Evolutionary psychiatrist Randolph Nesse has a name for exactly this kind of mismatch: the smoke detector principle. A cheap smoke detector is deliberately built to be oversensitive, going off for burnt toast just as readily as an actual house fire, because the cost of a false alarm, a little irritation, a fanned-out kitchen, is trivially small compared to the cost of a missed real fire. Nesse argues fear systems evolved under the exact same math. A fear response that fires too often, making you uneasy in a dark hallway that's actually completely safe, costs you almost nothing. A fear response that fires too rarely, staying calm in a dark hallway that actually contains a predator, could cost you your life. Natural selection doesn't calibrate for accuracy. It calibrates for survival, and an oversensitive alarm survives its own false positives far better than an undersensitive one survives a single true negative. Which means your unease in the dark was never really about the dark itself. It was about hundreds of thousands of years of the specific animals that used to wait in it. Watch how the fear actually shows up, especially in children, and the shape of it gives away its origin. It's rarely a generic, diffuse anxiety about the absence of light. It's almost always something with eyes watching, waiting, hiding just out of view, under the bed, inside the closet, at the edge of the tree line. That's not a coincidence, and it's not simply imagination running wild. It's an uncannily specific echo of exactly the kind of threat that shaped this fear in the first place. Not darkness in the abstract, but the very real, very old possibility of something patient and hungry, positioned somewhere just outside what your eyes can actually resolve. Modern life hasn't erased the instinct. It's just given it new outlets. The reflexive urge to flick on a hallway light, the specific comfort of a phone flashlight in an unfamiliar space, the low hum of a porch light left on overnight for no practical reason at all, are all functionally tiny modern campfires, small deliberate attempts to push back the one advantage the dark has always held over you. You don't consciously think of it that way. You just reach for the switch, the same basic impulse that once meant tending a fire until dawn, now compressed into a single unthinking motion of your thumb. Even entertainment has learned to exploit exactly this wiring. Horror films rarely show the threat clearly and immediately. They linger in dim rooms, half-open closet doors, the edge of a flashlight beam, because a half-glimpsed shape in low light triggers something far older and harder to dismiss than a fully visible monster ever could. A creature shown in full daylight is just information. A shape suggested in shadow gets processed by the same ancient system that once had to decide, in half a second, whether a rustle in the dark was wind or teeth. Think about how strange it is that a threat effectively eliminated from your daily life for thousands of years can still reach you. Tonight, In a hallway you've walked 1,000 times, in a house with functioning locks, in a neighborhood with no leopards in it. Nothing about your rational understanding of the risk changed. Something much older and much less negotiable simply refused to update. So the next time you find yourself reaching for a light switch in a dark room for no reason you can quite articulate, or feel that small, specific prickle of unease crossing a dark parking lot, try not dismissing it as irrational, leftover anxiety. It isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly the job it was built to do, running a threat assessment calibrated over hundreds of thousands of years by something that used to wait for you in exactly this kind of dark and hasn't yet been told, deep in whatever part of you still runs the alarm, that it's finally safe to stand down. You get up in the middle of the night for a glass of water, and your heart rate ticks up the moment the hallway goes dark. That isn't fear malfunctioning. That's a very old, very well-calibrated alarm system, still faithfully doing its job. Long after the thing it was built to watch for stopped waiting outside,